Pinning in, Fuaga out, and why the Nuss bus should be shut down on Saturday. We all got all that and more coming up on the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Hey, how you doing? Welcome back to another edition of the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Appreciate you listening into the pod. As always, if you haven't already, make sure you go ahead and subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you get your podcasts from. We appreciate it either way. Also, check us out on social media. That way you get more content in your lives, because we're going to try and post some more content on social that's exclusive to there. We're doing some stuff with YouTube right now, and that has definitely been a little bit of a surprising rise over the last couple of weeks since launching this pod. I can't believe it's been almost a month in the making. That said, it's time to kind of look over into the big games this weekend. We're going to start off with the NFL, namely with the New Orleans Saints and the injury updates that came out on Wednesday afternoon. And we got a little bit of case of good news and bad news, and it's all about what's going on with the offensive line. Good news is Trevor Penning has made his way back to practice, marking the first time he was part of the Saints practice since exiting the preseason game, the first one with a turf toe injury. He was limited in practice, but that's still a step in the right direction. Still TBD whether he is active or he's even going to be a full go in the game against the Seattle Seahawks with Sam Darnold at quarterback for the Seahawks. And obviously Spencer Rattler is going to be QB1 in that one, but it's a move in the right direction. But it looks like we're going to be dealing with another injury to the offensive line. Feels like when you get one back, potentially, you lose another one. This one could be a minute, with reports that from Kellen Moore saying that Fuaga sustained a back injury during week 2's loss to the 49ers. And this is on top of him managing a knee injury, which we kind of already knew about as a case of patellar tendon inflammation. But this is something you are going to have to kind of deal with. And throw in the fact that you have Dylan Radunes, who didn't practice yesterday. He was dealing with his own toe injury. So now you have to kind of rely on guys you don't necessarily know how the hell things are going to work out, especially if you don't see Trevor Penning out there for an extended period of time. I'm not saying you throw him out there right out the gate and you have him go ahead and just go full bore after being out for the last 4 or 5 weeks after a turf toe injury, because you could probably further exacerbate that. We're hearing, and it's wild, on a sidebar, is how many players, like the last few weeks, we've been hearing more and more about the turf toe. It feels like that should be an injury that's very manageable, and it's something that you more or less would avoid. Not as much manageable, I'd say, more you can handle making some adjustments to the way you play to where that doesn't happen as much. But we're seeing more of that pop up. And again, it might be just some freak accidents. But when you see, Brock Purdy in week 1 dealing with turf toe, he's out 3 to 5 weeks. Joe Burrow, former LSU Tiger, he's out for at least 3 months because he's having to have toe surgery because of the turf toe. Then you have Trevor Penning, the backup for Trevor Penning, dealing with the same thing now. It's just wild to see that big of an outbreak, or at least it's an outbreak relative to the amount of talent that's getting banged up. And again, it's early in the year. Hopefully Penning can show up. He's been looking better, especially in the position he is in now on the left side of the offensive line. He has gotten better. And losing right tackle Fuaga to a back injury, that's brutal, because those are the ones you don't like. It's those torso injuries that are a absolute mess to figure out what's going to happen. Because I've always seen, whenever it comes to torso injuries, and we talked about it a lot with Walker Howard and same with Nussmeier, but we'll get to him later, is the fact that you are pretty much beholden to that holding up over the course of the season and being consistent, because once you get hurt like that, it's a hard one to come back from 100%. You know, we talked about with Drew Brees in the mid 2010s when we talked about the Walker Howard injury. It's such, if it's worse than what you lead it on to be, you lose that rhythm, that consistency about how you throw. The motions are off, and that may be why you can't necessarily perform to the highest level. These turf toe injuries seem like a bit of freak accidents to me, the most non-athletic person on the planet, but it's something that you got to be concerned about. And with the offensive line, it continues to be an issue. We saw it a lot last season. I think that was the biggest reason why we saw the downswing of the Saints that became so precipitous. Because you look back at the beginning of last season, right? You open up a can of whoop ass week 1 and week 2. You dominated the Cowboys from the word go. Then you play the Philadelphia Eagles, the reigning defending Super Bowl champs, and you lose one of your star offensive linemen right out the gate. Like literally the first drive, and the defense of the Eagles pretty much smelled blood in the water, and they handled business in a big way. There was no coming back from that at that point. Losing him for an extended period of time hurt even more. So hopefully this isn't a recurring issue as the season progresses, and Fuaga can kind of make it manageable maybe after this week. I feel like he's probably going to be out for this contest, and then you got to kind of kick the can and move on to next week without him in that right tackle slot. Don't know who's going to fill his spot off the top of my head, but I feel like it's going to be intriguing to see who they fill in that role, especially with some of the other spots that you don't know what's going to happen. Again, going back to what I was saying about, Trevor Penning. They could move Trevor Penning back in that spot if he's able to go. But what if he's not able to go? Then you've got to figure out who's going to be the backup for the backup that is dealing with turf toe if he's not able to go. There's a lot of questions. And the offensive line did not look great against the 49ers. Yes, the 49ers have a great defense, but I think that this Saints offensive line is going to struggle if you don't have your line performing consistently a full 60 minutes. We saw it last week. The pressure got to Spencer Rattler once again on that final drive on that 4th and 2. And it seemed like it was very makeable, but the pocket collapsed within seconds. So at the end of the day, like that was one of those, yeah, you deserved to lose that game simply because of that. Now we'll go back to LSU, Florida one final time, because I think we do need to talk about, now that we've seen footage and there's more details surrounding what happened with Jabbar Juluke and why he got suspended for 3 games. Again, I kind of laughed it off a little bit knowing, oh, hey, he got a little too chippy and he shouldn't have gotten involved in that scuffle. Well, it turns out he was the one instigating the scuffle because footage has come out from the sideline and Jabbar Juluke put his hands on another player. Now, again, I can't help but to think about the instance during the infamous LSU A&M 7 overtime game where Kevin Falk is about to assault a person storming the field after that 7 overtime loss to Texas A&M to end the regular season. Like, go back and watch that. It's the footage of that looked horrible. And, Kevin Falk, he probably was reprimanded because of it, from what I can remember. But I think it's a lot different if you're putting your hands on another player on the opposing team. And honestly, 3-game suspension is not enough for Jabbar Juluke. I think if you're the Florida Gators, you have to. You have to say, hey, he needs to be kicked off the tour. You need to get him off the coaching staff either now or wait till the end of the season. Like, one of the two got to happen. Again, you're going to be suspending him for 3 games. I'd say, and again, that's an edict from the SEC. I think Florida needs to show that they understand that was unacceptable and beyond the pale So I think the conversation needs to be had over at Florida. Scott Strickland, Billy Napier, do what you got to do to get it done. But Jabbar Juluke, he got to go. That is a horrible look for your program to see a head coach putting his hands and slapping somebody on the opposing team. If you're a coach, you're supposed to handle yourself with a little bit more decorum. That was not a great look for your program and just yourself in general. And especially considering that you once coached there not too long ago. That was the more surprising part of this, because you'd think like, oh, hey, we have at least some mutual respect for it. I understand it's a rivalry game and both teams are up for it. You got to make better decisions, though, if you are Jabbar Juluke or any other coach that gets into that situation. You got to tell your guys, if anything, if you get involved in those scuffles, you got to be the get back guy. Or if you don't have a get back guy, go find one to tell your team to get back, because we don't need to add any more fuel to the fire, especially after the way the season has started. That's going to be something that I feel like the boosters, if they don't fire Billy Napier, I think they would say, all right, we need to get rid of Jabbar Juluke. That was a big black eye to the program. I feel like a lot of people are looking at us the wrong way. So he needs to go. Like, never had a bad interaction with Jabbar Juluke over the years, but even if I did have a bad interaction with him, I'd still say either way, he's got to go, because what he did was unacceptable. And we got one more thing, jumping ahead to LSU against Southeastern. And I think the Nuss bus needs to be shut down on Saturday. There's no doubt in my mind that he probably wants to play. He feels like he is a gamer and he's got that dog in him. But somebody's got to tell the dog, hey, you can't do this game. You can't play in this because of your injuries. We don't want to risk losing you as we get ready for the meat of the schedule. That's the thing I feel like most people aren't realizing, or at least the people that make the most decisions in that front office at LSU. They want to say, hey, we can't shut him down for another few weeks. No, you can absolutely shut him down at any time. One, because you're the head coach and you should have complete autonomy to tell your guy, hey, I'm sitting you down for this game because I cannot risk it. Because we've got big goals for 2025. Everybody wants us to be in the college football playoff. And I feel like the one way that we're going to be able to do that is if you don't get hurt in a game that is relatively meaningless against Southeastern. Again, every game means something. It's a 12-game season, for crying out loud. It's not an 82-game or 162-game baseball season or basketball season. Every single game matters, especially if you want to reach your goals of getting into the college football playoff and competing for a national championship. That said, you're playing Southeastern. That is a gimme game. You can literally put any of the other quarterbacks in there, start working on the run game, making sure that's better, and walk out of there with probably a 21-7 win without even blinking, especially that defense that we saw against Florida last weekend shows up in that ball game. Bottom line. Now, I hope LSU can kind of get that offense fired up and ready to go, but you have to keep your star quarterback healthy, because here's who you have the rest of the way. Here's who you have the rest of the season. You've got Ole Miss on the road in Oxford, hostile environment, and right now they're a top 13 team in the country. I feel like they could be top 10 depending how things go this weekend over in their matchup against Tulane. Then you have a bye week and you're taking on South Carolina. And South Carolina does not have Lenore Sellers possibly ready to go for this game on Saturday, their next game. But more likely than not, if he's not ready for this Saturday, he's definitely going to be ready for the game against LSU on October 11th. Then you have the 20th ranked as of right now. Vanderbilt and Diego Pavia, who, depending who you talk to and depending which way the sun rises, he's going to go for his 7th year of eligibility. Excuse me. Then you have Texas A&M, who is right now ranked top 10 in the country. And I hate to say this, but it is justified. Then you have a week off. Of course you do. And you take on Alabama. Then it's Arkansas. You get a little bit of a break. You get Arkansas, LSU. LSU plays Western Kentucky after that. And then you got Oklahoma to round up the regular season. And Oklahoma feels like they are a lot better team than I thought they would be heading into it. So you've got a murderer's row going into November, and I feel like you could handle business against Alabama. But beyond that, you've got to get through starting next week against Ole Miss through the Texas A&M game going into the bye week, into the second bye week. You have to handle that business in a particular way. So if you've got to shut down, Garrett Nussmeier for a week in a game that is about as pointless as the letter G in lasagna, come on now. You have to make the right decision if you're Brian Kelly. I understand Garrett Nussmeier is a gamer, but sometimes you got to step in and be the right coach and take pride in knowing that you are making the right decision and not putting your star quarterback, a guy that's going to be more likely than not, especially if he plays his cards right and it gets better as the season progresses, he's going to be a first-round pick, and that is another thing you can put on the recruiting board for that next star quarterback alongside the NIL money, that you can say that you helped build 2 first-round draft picks in the quarterback position. Potentially Garrett Nussmeier and then Jaden Daniels, who won a Heisman a couple years ago. That's another feather in your cap if you're Brian Kelly. If you're the coaching staff, you can say that narrative all day long. And I don't understand why they're not thinking that way. Is we have a chance to do something spectacular in 2025 and lead this team back to a national championship for the first time in about 6 years. And people a while back didn't think that was going to be possible to do that again, especially after the way things ended with Ed Ogeron. So with all that said, Brian Kelly has to let Nussmeier sit and be. He needs to say, hey, I understand you want to play. I love you, but I don't want to risk you getting hurt because you don't need to risk getting hurt in this game. You need to take a week off, make sure you're ready to go whenever you play Ole Miss in a massive, massive, massive game. Like, let me put it this way. I think if Ole Miss and LSU play next Saturday, 2:30 p.m., and LSU wins that, they're more likely than not going to be either the number 2 or the number 1 team in the country because of the amount of talent that they've played. They beat Clemson, who has looked more like the Clemsoning of the early 2010s rather than the late 2010s Clemson teams that were making the CFP. And you beat a Florida team in a really competitive ball game. The defense looks a lot more stout. We're seeing the DBU make its way back to accreditation. Shout out to that secondary and, more importantly, Corey Raymond for bringing DBU back to the forefront. You've got a killer front 7 led by Whit Weeks. Even West Weeks looked good. Again, Devon Keys looked fantastic. There's a reason why he was named the Bronco Nagurski National Player of the Week in the linebacker position. There's a reason why he was named the SEC Defensive Player of the Week. The guy was him and filled in extremely well considering the situation he was thrust into. I feel like you put a lot of freshmen in that spot, they would shrink. He didn't. And that's what you need to see from guys that are absolute gamers. So at the end of the day, going back to Nussmeier, you cannot play him on Saturday against Southeastern. I understand the optics of not starting a guy in a game, but you've got to place your bets the right way and bet on your guy being healthy before your first true test of the season is upon you. Ole Miss is going to test you a lot more than Florida or Clemson ever will. That's just straight up facts. And that's going to do it for today's edition of the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Get back to you tomorrow with a Pick'em edition on a Friday to kick off your weekend on the right foot. So make sure you go check us out on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, Instagram, Threads. We're all over the place. So make sure you go check us out. Just search Louisiana Lunch Hour and you'll find us pretty quickly. And also subscribe if you haven't already to us wherever and whenever you get your podcasts.